HOA Karen sprayed my garden with poison but didn't know I installed soil sensors. Part 1. I knew something was wrong the second I stepped outside. It was 6:12 a.m., and the morning sun hadn't even cleared the ridge. Dew still clung to the blades of grass. My boots crunched softly across the gravel path as I carried a fresh tray of lettuce seedlings to the far beds. And then I saw it. My collard greens, lush and thriving the day before, were collapsed in a way no plant ever should be. Not from drought, not from wind, not even from a bad transplant. This was something else. A chemical death. I dropped the tray. My stomach clenched as I ran my hands over the stems. The leaves were slick, curling in on themselves, edges brown and necrotic. I smelled something under the soil, something bitter, acrid, herbicide, and I knew exactly who did it. Karen. My name is Lainey Myers. I'm 29, a former botany major turned small plot organic grower. After a messy divorce and years in a cubicle, I took what I had left and bought a small fixer-upper in Brookvale Hollow. Quiet neighborhood, big backyards, no real HOA, just a handful of residents who'd printed off some bylaws in 1997 and still acted like they were running a gated community. I wasn't here to start trouble. I just wanted to grow. Food, peace, a future. I built 3 raised beds from salvaged wood, installed drip lines, started composting. Every morning, I rose at dawn to tend the soil and watch my little kingdom bloom. That was before Karen made me her project. The first time we met, I was repotting tomato starts on my porch. She walked right up the steps like she owned them and said, "You know this neighborhood is supposed to be decorative, not agricultural." Right. No introduction, no smile, just judgment. She wore white sandals and a matching white visor that looked like it came with a whistle. Her manicure didn't have a chip in sight. I smiled politely. "I'm licensed. The bylaws don't restrict vegetable gardening as long as it's for personal consumption." She narrowed her eyes. "We'll see about that." I should have known then. She started small. First, she left typed notes in my mailbox request to remove the unsightly compost barrel or limit trellis height to 4 feet per neighborhood aesthetic. I ignored her. She escalated. She called the county once, reporting odors. The inspector apologized to me and laughed. He said she once tried to cite a neighbor for having a decorative birdhouse too colorful for HOA standards. Next, she knocked on my door and told me children walk past this house and asked me if I had considered how pesticide-free gardens might attract pests. I told her my plants were clean, organic, tested, and I didn't use anything unless I could eat it myself. That must have threatened her, because last night, she finally snapped. I opened the side gate and walked toward the bed closest to her fence. My breath caught. The peas were gone, burned through the stems, snapdragons, melted at the root. My charred patch looked like it had been torched from below, and then I saw the first blinking light. I dropped to my knees, pushed aside the mulch, and pulled up the sensor, a palm-sized black puck embedded 6 inches into the soil. It was flashing orange. I tapped the side. The screen lit up. I scrolled through the data. 2:13 a.m. Abnormal pH spike. 2:14 a.m. Glyphosate compound detected. 2:14 a.m. Root zone alert chemical intrusion threshold exceeded. My eyes widened. The sensor had caught it in real time. And not just in one bed. I had 5 sensors, buried across all my zones. A full ring of silent witnesses. I scrambled to the shed and yanked open my laptop. The dashboard loaded. I pulled up the timeline from last night and froze. 2:12 a.m. Motion detected. 2:13 a.m. Foreign compound present. 2:14 a.m. Application persisted for 3 minutes and 24 seconds. And then grainy, but unmistakable, my night vision cam recorded a figure in a robe and garden gloves stepping through the back gate. She crouched, sprayed, then vanished back over the side fence like a ghost. Karen, for a minute. I just sat there, hand over my mouth. Anger didn't even begin to describe it. This was deliberate, premeditated, and personal. She came into my yard at night with poison. She destroyed weeks of work, weeks of composting, planting, hand watering. She tried to erase something alive, and she thought she'd get away with it. But she didn't know what I had buried in the soil. She didn't know the garden was listening. I didn't go to the police. Not yet. Not until I had more. I spent the next 2 hours collecting footage, downloading sensor logs, and pulling together every instance of her harassment emails, voicemails, even her snide posts on the Brookvale Neighborhood Watch forum. At 10 a.m., I walked to her house and knocked. She opened the door half an inch. "Can I help you?" "You were in my yard last night." Her expression didn't even flicker. "Excuse me, I have footage. And soil data. You sprayed something on my beds." She gave a tight laugh. "That's absurd. Why would I care about your weeds?" I smiled. "Because you've been trying to kill them for months. Figuratively. Last night you made it literal. I suggest you watch your tone. And I suggest you find a lawyer." I turned and walked away. Behind me, her door slammed like a gavel. That night, I uploaded the footage to a private server and sent it to 3 neighbors I trusted: Mr. Lee, a retired chemist; Ava, who ran the community Facebook page; and Dr. Riley, a school counselor who used to be a civil mediator. I titled the email "Need Advice." My garden was poisoned. By noon the next day, I had 3 replies, and by 6 p.m., I had 3 allies. Mr. Lee offered to test the soil samples himself. "I've got the equipment in my garage." "Don't ask," Ava said. "If this is what it looks like, we can't let it stay quiet. Brookvale needs to see this." And Dr. Riley simply wrote, "You're not alone anymore." Something shifted in me. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was ready. Karen didn't just attack my garden. She challenged my roots. Now I was going to show her that the earth remembers everything. Part 2. If you'd told me 2 weeks ago that soil sensors would become the cornerstone of a suburban justice movement, I would have laughed. But here I was dragging bags of mulch off the back of Mr. Lee's truck while a retired chemist in a bucket hat pulled on nitrile gloves like he was walking into a crime scene. By that Friday morning, we were treating my garden like an environmental disaster site. We took 12 soil samples from the 5 affected beds. Lee marked each location with colored flags. "We're not just looking for glyphosate," he explained, eyes serious behind his glasses. "We're looking for intent, distribution patterns, consistency. If it's patchy, it's runoff. If it's even, then someone meant it." I finished. He nodded. "Let's find out." Inside my house, Ava sat at my kitchen table with her laptop open and her phone buzzing nonstop. I posted a teaser on the Brookvale Watch page. She said, "Didn't name names. Just asked what would you do if your neighbor poisoned your garden, then denied it." She gave a sly smile. "Got 63 comments in an hour. People are fired up. Is that a good thing?" "Depend. Karen's already DM'd me twice." "You serious?" "She accused me of starting a smear campaign. Said she has influence." Ava's eyebrows arched. "What she has is fear. We're rattling her cage." I sat down, heart thudding. "We're not even done yet. And we don't have to be," she said. "You've got footage, you've got data, and soon you'll have chemistry." She leaned forward. "The garden is your battleground now. Laney, but the community is your greenhouse." By Monday, Mr. Lee's results were in. He presented them like a courtroom expert witness, placing 3 folders on my kitchen island. Glyphosate concentrations were consistent across 5 zones, elevated enough to trigger immediate wilt in leafy greens. Concentration was too high to be runoff or drift. This was deliberate application. My throat tightened. He flipped to a page with red-marked graphs. "She targeted your food beds, left the pollinator garden untouched. Whoever did this knew what they were doing and where to strike." That was the proof we needed, and we weren't going to keep it quiet. The next morning, Ava and I met with Dr. Riley at the community clubhouse. She brought a whiteboard and printed handouts because of course she did. She'd spent the weekend putting together a community truth session, a concept she used during her mediation years. I don't believe in public shaming, she said, but I do believe in public healing. We show the footage. We present the data. We open a forum. Let the people decide what's next. Ava raised an eyebrow. You think Karen's going to show up? She always does, I said. Control only works when it's visible. We announced the meeting for Thursday night. Simple flyer, no name calling, just the facts. The truth beneath our feet. A night of garden justice and neighborhood conversation. Brookvale Clubhouse, 6:00 p.m. Featuring soil science, surveillance footage, and the future of community trust. By Thursday afternoon, over 50 residents RSVP'd. Karen posted on the Watch Forum calling the event an unlicensed witch hunt. She claimed she was being targeted by conspiracy theorists and warned others against attending. But they came anyway. The clubhouse buzzed with quiet tension. Folding chairs packed the floor, projector humming, coffee tables stacked with soil charts and laminated stills from my footage. Mr. Lee wore a Trust the Science t-shirt and stood beside his sample display like it was a museum exhibit. I took the mic. My name is Lainey Myers. I moved here a year ago with a shovel and a dream. I wanted to grow something healthy in Brookvale, but someone didn't want that to happen. I tapped the laptop. Footage rolled. Karen, garden gloves. A faint hiss of the sprayer. Time stamped. Motion activated. Her robe flapping in the breeze. The unmistakable silhouette of someone who never thought she'd be caught. Gasps echoed through the room. Then came the stills, the sensor logs, the data overlays from Mr. Lee's lab. Finally, a simple chart, normal soil versus mine. Then silence. Until Dr. Riley stepped forward. We aren't here to punish. We're here to ask what kind of neighborhood do we want to be? That's when Karen walked in. Late. Deliberately. Dressed in all white. She stood in the back, arms crossed, lips curled. I was told this was an informational event, not a public trial. Dr. Riley calmly responded. We presented data, video, and lab results. You're welcome to share your perspective. Karen scoffed. This is harassment, slander. Then refute it. I said. She opened her mouth and stopped. Ava tapped a key. Another clip played. Karen's voice. From a voicemail she left me last month. Maybe if you stopped growing weeds, the neighborhood wouldn't look so trashy. She stared at the screen. The room stared at her. Then someone said from the back, You always hated her garden. Admit it. Another voice my daughter learned to plant from Lainey. Why would you destroy that? Karen took a step back. Then another. Her voice cracked. You people don't understand. We used to have standards. Then she turned and walked out. And this time, no one followed her. Afterward, people stayed. They asked about planting workshops, about soil health, about how to set up cameras and sensors. And they apologized. Not because they were involved, but because they'd looked away until it was personal. That night, I walked home under a sky full of stars, my phone buzzing with support messages, soil requests, and invites for coffee. Karen had tried to isolate me, but instead, she rooted me deeper into my community than I'd ever dreamed. Part 3. I thought it ended the night Karen walked out of that clubhouse. I thought showing the footage, the data, and the destruction would be enough that she'd retreat, ashamed, and that the neighborhood would heal now that her grip had been broken. I was wrong. Because some people, when cornered, don't surrender. They dig deeper. And that's exactly what Karen did. She went underground. It started with the flowers. 2 days after the meeting, Ms. Adair, an 82-year-old widow who lived across the street, called me crying. They're all dead. Lainey, all my petunias, every last one. I went to her house, her front garden, normally bursting with purple and red blossoms, looked like a battlefield. The soil was scorched. the stems limp and twisted, and the same smell I knew too well hung in the air. Glyphosate. Ms. Adair's hands trembled as she knelt beside them. I don't understand. Who would do this? I did. I filed a police report that afternoon. The officer, Martinez, was kind but cautious. We don't have direct evidence tying her to this one. He said, you had footage last time. Sensors. This one's just a suspicion. Suspicion based on a pattern. I replied, and escalating behavior. He nodded. We'll file it. But unless we catch her in the act again, it's still a civil matter. A civil matter. Like poisoning a senior citizen's garden was a neighborhood squabble over hedge height. That night, I emailed the neighborhood listserv. I kept it measured, factual, following the destruction of my crops in the community forum. Another resident, Ms. Adair, has experienced a similar attack on her garden. If anyone has had unexplained plant loss, please contact me directly. We are compiling reports and requesting a formal investigation. The floodgates opened. Within 48 hours, I had 9 emails. 9. One neighbor said their peach sapling shriveled overnight. Another said their dog got sick after sniffing the mulch. Someone else said their compost pile had been scattered and sprayed with what they thought was detergent. Each story had one thing in common: proximity to Karen's property, or rather, the alley behind her backyard. So I checked my cameras again. This time, not the ones on my property, but the camera I helped Jordan install above his garage. It caught a narrow view of the alley that ran behind several homes, including Karen's. And on a chilly Wednesday morning, at 2:41 a.m., it recorded a hooded figure creeping along the fence line. She didn't use a sprayer this time, just a squeeze bottle. She crouched low, pouring it in arcs at the base of plants along back fences. I zoomed in. Even in grainy infrared, the posture was unmistakable. Her walk, her rhythm, the way she always tilted her head after spraying. Karen, again. This time, I didn't go to the neighborhood page. I went straight to the County Agriculture Enforcement Unit. I brought Mr. Lee's report, the footage, Ms. Adair's testimony, the timeline of incidents, and a USB drive labeled Evidence, Karen Delling. 2 days later, I got a call from a man named Grant Richards, head of the county's Environmental Hazard Task Force. His tone was clipped, professional. We'll be visiting the neighborhood this week, he said. Do not alert the suspect. Friday morning, unmarked county trucks rolled into Brookvale Hollow. Karen watched them from her porch, arms folded, face pale. Grant and his team walked the perimeter of her property, then the alley, then the homes along the fence line. They took soil samples, interviewed residents, reviewed footage, photographed everything. By 3:00 p.m., Karen was issued a temporary restraining order barring her from coming within 25 feet of any home not her own. But the real bombshell came that evening. Ava called, nearly breathless. You have to see this. She'd been digging through public records, not just Karen's HOA complaints, but her background. And what she found made my skin go cold. 5 years ago, in her previous neighborhood, Larkspur Terrace, Karen had been removed from the HOA board after multiple reports of property interference. The details were vague, sealed in mediation agreements, but one incident mentioned unauthorized chemical application on a resident's property. She's done this before, Ava whispered. She got away with it, and she moved here to start over. I stared at the screen. She hadn't just hated my garden. She hated what it represented. Autonomy, community, growth she couldn't control. We brought it to the task force with Ava's research, Ms. Adair's testimony, and the newest footage. They had enough. Karen was formally charged with 3 counts of property destruction, 1 count of chemical trespass, and a misdemeanor violation of Environmental Code, Federal 431, 17 use of herbicide on private land without consent. She was fingerprinted at the county office the following Monday. The whole neighborhood knew. But here's what no one expected. The day after her arrest, Karen's adult daughter showed up at my house. She knocked, holding a box of old photos and a trembling breath. I'm Stephanie, she said quietly. Karen's daughter. I nodded, unsure. Can I help you? I want to say I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. I invited her in. We sat in the kitchen. She placed the box on the table. She's been like this a long time, Stephanie said. My whole childhood. Control, anger, obsessions with lawns and fences and order. We moved almost every 2 years. She got us kicked out of neighborhoods, and now she opened the box. Letters, photos of gardens, handwritten HOA complaints in thick red marker. She flipped one over a photo of me on my porch, holding a watering can, my garden behind me. She's been documenting you since you moved in, she said softly. I didn't know it had gotten this far. I gave the box to the task force. It was more than enough to prove premeditation, obsession, and a history of boundary violations. Karen's hearing was set for early next month. She was ordered into a court-mandated evaluation. The neighborhood voted 42-2 to ban her from future participation in any community policy or committee, and her house for sale sign went up a week later. No one waved when the moving truck came. The soil in Ms. Adair's garden has started recovering. She planted marigolds. The kids down the block are learning to compost again. I replaced my beds and added even more sensors. And the town is launching a new program, Community Roots, focused on protecting public green spaces from malicious interference. I was asked to help lead the initiative because gardens aren't just about food, they're about care, dignity, respect for living things. Karen tried to bury all of that in poison, but she forgot something vital. You can't kill a garden that's already seated in the hearts of others. Part 4. You never expect a tragedy to bloom into something beautiful. The soil where Karen poured poison now held young sunflower sprouts. 2 weeks after her final act of sabotage, Ms. Adair's garden looked like a sanctuary again. Soft green vines climbing fresh trellises, and rows of vibrant seedlings rising from the once burned ground. It reminded me of something my grandmother used to say: the garden remembers who tended it and who tried to take it. I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted to rebuild, and this time, I wanted everyone to grow with me. The week after Karen's arrest, the Brookvale Council formally invited me to speak at the town hall. They wanted to discuss creating protections for resident gardens, launching a pilot for sustainable community plots, and building out a soil data sharing program to prevent future abuse. It felt surreal walking up those concrete steps with a USB drive full of presentation slides in one pocket and compost dirt still under my fingernails. Grant Richards from the County Environmental Task Force met me at the door. You made waves, he said, grinning. The footage, the data sensors, the soil testing. It's all over the interdepartmental reports. You have no idea how rare that kind of clear documentation is in neighborhood conflicts. I laughed nervously. I wasn't trying to go viral. I just wanted to protect my kale. Well, now you're protecting half the county, he replied. Inside the council chambers, the room was packed. Reporters, gardeners, teachers, a row of elementary students holding little paper cutouts of sunflowers, and front row center Miss Adair, wearing a wide straw hat and smiling like she was at a summer picnic. I stepped to the podium, took a breath, and started with the truth. I'm not an activist. I'm a grower. I came to Brookvale for peace, for soil, for sunlight. I didn't expect sabotage, but I also didn't expect solidarity. When my garden was attacked, the neighborhood stood up, and we didn't just react, we organized. We grew together. I clicked to the first slide, the footage, the data overlays, the community testimonies. Then I showed the after, the rebuilt beds, the kids planting snap peas, the soil charts. Post-restoration, we turned the most bitter act of control into something rooted in resilience. And now, I'm asking you, help us protect that growth. The motion passed unanimously. Brookvale became the first municipality in the county to establish a formal ordinance protecting personal garden plots under environmental preservation and residential security, a fancy title for what we all called Laney's Law. It wasn't just about chemical sabotage anymore. It was about recognizing gardens as expression, not just landscaping. They allocated $50,000 in grants to start Community Roots. The program Grant and I proposed together. It would support garden security systems, install weatherproof sensor kits, and provide public education on organic cultivation. And they made me director. At first, I hesitated. "Are you sure I'm the right person for this?" I asked Grant. "I'm not some nonprofit executive. I have dirt under my nails and a laptop that still runs Windows 10. He grinned. "Exactly why you're perfect. We started small. I hired Ava as media coordinator. Mr. Lee offered to do soil checks for free. Ms. Adair became our honorary outreach chair. And Jordan, my next-door neighbor who once barely waved, volunteered to build a garden fence workshop for seniors. The momentum was real. By the end of the month, we had 20 gardens enrolled in the pilot program. By spring, we had 94. And then the story hit the news. A local station ran a 3-minute segment titled "Poison in the Petunias: How a Gardener Fought Back with Data." It featured my garden, Karen's footage blurred, and a clip of kids planting carrots in Ms. Adair's yard. The comments section exploded. People across the country reached out. From Michigan to California, folks sent photos of their community plots and stories of similar harassment. Some had been fined for non-conforming trellises. Others were told vegetable gardens weren't aesthetically compatible. We weren't alone. So I turned Community Roots into an open-source initiative, free guides, video tutorials, and downloadable templates for data sensors and conflict documentation. We called it the Soil Circle. By July, it was in 12 states. But the biggest shock came from the State House. A local representative, Nina Morgan, contacted me. She'd seen the footage, read the ordinance, and wanted to push a statewide Garden Rights Act, a bill protecting personal edible gardens from HOA overreach and chemical sabotage. She invited me to testify, and just like that, I found myself in front of the House Subcommittee on Residential Land Use, holding up a soil puck and explaining how a $40 sensor caught the crime a legal system almost missed. Sometimes justice grows from the ground up. I told them, and if you want healthier communities, you have to protect the people willing to get their hands dirty. Back in Brookvale, things had changed. Not just the laws, but the people. Neighbors who once stayed silent now helped build raised beds together. Karen's house, which sat empty for weeks after her moving truck left, was bought by a couple in their 50s, Jamal and Terry, who turned the backyard into a communal herb garden and added a little library box beside the gate. Terry told me on her second day, "I saw what you did here. We want to be part of it." That was the moment I knew Karen hadn't just lost. She'd been replaced not by someone loud or controlling, but by kindness, by community. That fall, we hosted the first Brookvale Harvest Day. There were tables of baked goods made from backyard apples, kids in overalls giving tomato tours, a build-your-own compost bin booth, and, of course, Miss Adair sold out of her famous marigold seedlings by noon. Near the stage, I saw a young couple pointing at the soil sensors embedded around the demonstration beds. "He's the one who made those," the woman whispered, nodding toward Mr. Lee. He laughed and gave them a thumbs up. "Doctor?" Riley stood beside me, sipping cider. "You know," she said, "Karen thought you were threatening the order here." I nodded. "Because I didn't ask permission to grow." Riley smiled. "You didn't just grow plants, Laney. You grew power." At the end of the festival, I stepped up to the mic. It was the same stage Karen once stood near, with her flyers and complaints. Now it held sunflowers, baskets of squash, and a line of messy, smiling kids. Not long ago, I began. Someone tried to kill this community with poison, but poison doesn't always win. Not when the roots run deeper than fear. I looked out at the crowd. We proved something this year, that justice can start in the dirt, that small acts matter, and that a neighborhood is only as strong as the people willing to nurture it. Applause, cheering. A chant started. Grow together, grow together. I blinked back tears. As the sun set, I walked back to my garden. The wind was cool, the light golden, and under the soil, my sensors blinked quietly, watching, recording, remembering, just like me. Part 5. I never set out to change the world. I just wanted to grow a garden. Something I could touch, water, believe in. After everything I'd been through, my divorce, the stress of moving, the overwhelming loneliness that followed, I needed something alive to remind me that I was, too. But life has a way of turning seeds into forests, and the garden that started in my backyard, it didn't stay there. 6 months after Karen's arrest, I stood at the state capitol building, a small clipboard in one hand, a soil sensor puck in the other. The Residential Garden Rights Act, nicknamed Laney's Law in the press, had passed the House. The Senate vote was today. Outside, dozens of supporters from across the state gathered with banners reading, "Grow freely," "Hands off our soil," and "Gardens are homes too." Some wore straw hats. Others held seedlings in biodegradable cups. A few kids waved painted signs with worms and radishes on them. A woman from Minneapolis approached me, clutching a photo of a withered zucchini patch. "This was mine," she said. "My HOA told me vegetables weren't community appropriate. I saw your video." I cried, and then I planted again. I hugged her. That was the moment I understood this wasn't about me anymore. Inside, the chamber was filled to capacity. Senator Nina Morgan, who had become a good friend, rose to speak. Too often, we treat gardens like luxuries instead of necessities. But what Laney Myers taught us is that a garden can be the last sanctuary for someone trying to reclaim their peace, their health, their identity, and that no one, no HOA, no board, no neighbor with a vendetta has the right to destroy that. She held up a photo of my garden, pre-poisoning rows of kale, sunflowers dancing in the wind, and me, knees dirty, smiling at something blooming. This is not a code violation. This is healing. When the vote passed, 36-4, the chamber erupted. I closed my eyes and whispered, "We did it." Back home in Brookvale, things had changed in ways I never could have predicted. Community Roots was now a nonprofit with volunteers in 17 states. Soil Circle, our sensor sharing and garden rights initiative, had been downloaded 200,000 times. Ava had been invited to speak at the National Urban Ag Conference. Mr. Lee got a shout-out in Scientific American for his DIY soil test kits. And Ms. Adair, she had her own gardening blog now. At 83, she called it Marigold Justice. But my life changed, too. With funding from the state's new Green Grants program, we opened the Light Garden Brookvale's first fully public, 100% organic, tech-integrated community plot. We had solar-powered irrigation, open Wi-Fi, benches made from reclaimed wood, and, of course, soil sensors in every bed. It became a place for people to connect. Mornings brought school children. Evenings brought retired veterans and young couples. People who'd never spoken before now traded tomato seeds and weather tips. There was laughter where there used to be suspicion, growth where there had once been control. Then came the letter. It was hand-delivered by a courier. No return address. I opened it slowly. "Laney, I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I'm getting help. The court-mandated therapy forced me to face a lot of things. Not just what I did to you, but what I've done to myself, to my daughter, to every place I tried to make perfect. You reminded me that sometimes control is in order. It's fear, and maybe, somewhere deep down, I was afraid of how free you looked in that garden. I'm sorry, K.D." I folded the letter carefully. I didn't frame it. I didn't burn it either. I planted it beneath the roots of a newly sprouted apple tree. Spring came, warm and wide. My backyard, once the site of destruction, now danced with bees and colors again. A new generation of seedlings had taken root in the same beds Karen tried to kill. But this time, they weren't alone. We'd expanded. One bed for community herbs, another for donation crops, one reserved for a disabled neighbor who used to work with veterans. Every week, The harvest went to a local pantry, fresh and proud, and the sensors still blinked, steady and faithful. Not because I feared sabotage, but because I believed in recording truth. In never letting the darkness rewrite the story, one Sunday afternoon, I hosted a garden tour for nearby neighborhoods starting their own plots. As I led the group past my beets and peppers, a little girl tugged at my sleeve. "Miss Laney," she whispered, "how do you make them grow like this?" I knelt beside her, smiled, and said, "You listen to them." She blinked. Like, "Talk to them." "Sometimes," I said, "but mostly, you just care enough to pay attention." She nodded solemnly and reached out to touch a leaf. Behind her, parents smiled, neighbors waved, and the soil beneath our feet held the stories we refused to forget. At sunset, I sat alone in my favorite corner of the yard, notebook in hand, sipping iced tea as the light danced across the green. The garden didn't hum with pain anymore. It pulsed with peace, and as the wind whispered across the beds, I thought of everything that came from one act of cruelty, a neighborhood reborn, a law rewritten, a community awakened, and a woman me who finally realized that her hands weren't just meant to grow, they were meant to protect, to resist, to nurture justice. So if you're reading this, if your garden was stolen, if your roots were poisoned, if your peace was treated like a violation, let me be the first to tell you, they may step on your soil, but they will never stop the bloom. The end.